In the biting chill of a Birmingham Thanksgiving Eve, where hearths glowed warm and families gathered close, a different kind of warmth flickered in the weary heart of Jeremiah Jerry Washington. He wasn't carving turkey or sharing laughter. Instead, beneath the skeletal branches of winter trees and a sky spitting icy snow, he was about to make a choice born not of obligation, but of a deep, resonant humanity that would ripple outwards, changing the very course of his life and the lives of those he was yet to meet. Are you ready to witness how a single act of selfless kindness can echo into the extraordinary? In the heart of Birmingham, Alabama, Jeremiah Jerry Washington, a black man weathered by 40 hard years and the relentless grind of entrepreneurship, wrestled with the ghosts of unpaid bills in the cramped, dimly lit office of Washington's Auto Haven. Thanksgiving Eve. A cruel irony hung in the frigid air, thicker than the exhaust fumes that usually permeated his garage. Outside, families were coalescing, laughter bubbling up like spiced cider on stoves. But within these cinderblock walls, a different kind of gathering was taking place, the grim assembly of financial anxieties. Bills lay scattered across his scarred wooden desk like fallen leaves, each one a stark reminder of the economic frost that had settled over his city, chilling his business to its core. Jerry rubbed his temples, the fluorescent hum of the overhead light a monotonous drone against the frantic symphony of thoughts in his head. The numbers stubbornly refused to align, mocking his late-night calculations and desperate attempts to conjure solvency from thin air. Business had been a parched desert for months, each day a mirage of dwindling hope. The tightening grip of the recession had choked the life out of discretionary spending, and car repairs, unless absolutely critical, were being postponed, deferred, or patched up with prayers and duct tape. His father's legacy, Washington's Auto Haven, a place built brick by painstaking brick, wrench turned by sweat-soaked wrench, was now gasping for air, barely afloat in a sea of red ink. He'd already made the agonizing decision to let Marcus, his most reliable mechanic, go last month, a cut that felt like amputating his own arm. The wrenching guilt of that lay heavy in his gut, a constant, dull ache. If things didn't drastically turn around, and soon, more sacrifices would be demanded, each one chipping away at the foundation his father, a man of quiet strength and unwavering integrity, had laid. The specter of closure loomed, a dark cloud threatening to extinguish the flickering flame of his father's dream, a dream Jerry had sworn to protect, to nurture, to carry forward into the future. This wasn't just a business, it was a sacred trust, a tangible piece of his heritage, a testament to his father's unwavering belief in hard work and honest dealings. The late November wind, a banshee wail, hammered against the corrugated metal walls of the garage, rattling the single-pane windows in their frames, each gust a frigid finger tracing icy patterns down his spine. Even with the ancient, wheezing space heater valiantly battling the encroaching cold, a persistent chill clung to the air, seeping into his bones, mirroring the cold dread in his heart. The day before Thanksgiving, a day meant for gratitude, for abundance, for the comforting embrace of loved ones. But for Jerry, it was a stark reminder of his isolation, of the heavy burden he carried alone. While the aroma of roasting turkeys and cinnamon spice pies would soon fill homes across Birmingham, Jerry was trapped in this stark office, wrestling with spreadsheets and ledgers, desperately trying to conjure a miracle, a way to keep the lights burning, at least for another month. His phone buzzed, a jarring interruption in the oppressive silence, momentarily severing the chains of his spiraling thoughts. He glanced at the caller ID. Jasmine, his younger sister. A wave of reluctant affection washed over him. He answered, forcing a lightness into his tone he didn't feel. "Hey Jasmine," he managed, trying to mask the bone-deep weariness that clung to his voice like the damp chill of the garage. "Hey big brother," her voice resonated with warmth, a familiar balm of concern and sisterly love. "You're still coming for Thanksgiving tomorrow, right?" The kids are practically vibrating with excitement to see Uncle Jerry. "Little Maya made you a special napkin ring, glitter glue and everything. You know how she gets." He sighed, leaning back in his worn, creaking chair, the leather cracked and peeling like his own resolve. "Yeah, of course, I'll be there. Around 5? The image of Maya's earnest, glitter-dusted face flashed in his mind, a brief flicker of warmth against the encroaching cold. He could almost smell the pumpkin pie Jasmine always baked, the scent of phantom comfort in the sterile office air. He heard the almost imperceptible hesitation in her voice before she spoke again, a sister's intuition finely tuned to his emotional frequencies. "You sure you're okay, Jerry? You don't sound too good." He forced a chuckle, a hollow, brittle sound that even he didn't quite believe. Just a long day, Jazz. That's all. But yeah, I'll be there. Tell the little monsters to save me a mountain of that candied yam casserole you make. You got it, she replied, but the lingering thread of concern in her voice remained taut. See you tomorrow, then. See ya, he mumbled, the line going dead. He ran a calloused, grease-stained hand down his tired face, the stubble scratching against his palm. He desperately wanted to be there, to lose himself in the chaotic joy of his niece and nephew, to momentarily escape the crushing weight of his responsibilities. But even the thought of laughter and familial warmth felt distant, almost dreamlike, overshadowed by the relentless gnawing of debt and the suffocating uncertainty of the future. Still, he clung to the promise, a fragile lifeline in the storm. For one evening, just one, he would attempt to barricade his worries, to build a temporary dam against the rising tide of anxiety, and allow himself to simply be Uncle Jerry, to savor the fleeting grace of family, of connection, of a good meal shared in warmth and light. He had to. For his own sanity, he absolutely had to. The next morning dawned, gray and unforgiving, mirroring the landscape of Jerry's mood. He rose before the sun, the pre-dawn chill seeping through the thin walls of his small bungalow. He threw himself into work, a desperate act of self-therapy, hoping the rhythmic clang of metal against metal, the focused concentration of diagnosing engine troubles, would somehow clear the fog of worry that clung to his mind. He spent the day in the cavernous garage, a solitary figure amidst the hulking metal skeletons of automobiles, tuning engines, wrestling with brake calipers, coaxing life back into tired machines. But the truth was a stark, unwelcome companion. There were barely any customers. The holiday season was always a slow bleed for auto repair, people prioritizing gifts and travel over tune-ups. But this year felt particularly bleak, the silence in the garage amplifying his sense of isolation and impending doom. By the time 4:30 p.m. crept around, casting long, skeletal shadows across the shop floor, Jerry was physically and emotionally depleted, ready to lock up, to retreat into the hollow comfort of his empty home. He shrugged into his worn leather jacket, the familiar scent of oil and old leather a strange comfort, zipped it against the bitter bite of the approaching evening, and stepped outside, into the hushed, expectant stillness. Snow flurries, delicate and ephemeral, were already pirouetting down from the bruised, twilight sky, dusting the cracked pavement in a fragile layer of white. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the frigid air stinging his lungs, appreciating the deceptive tranquility of the moment, the world holding its breath before the full onslaught of winter. He fumbled for his truck keys, the cold metal biting into his numb fingers. Then his phone shrilled again, an unwelcome intrusion into the fragile peace. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, stark and demanding. He hesitated, a knot tightening in his stomach. Another bill collector? A wrong number? He almost ignored it, almost let it ring out into the snowy silence. But something, a persistent tug of intuition, urged him to answer. He swiped the screen. Carter Auto Repair, this is Jerry. A woman's voice, laced with raw urgency, fractured with rising panic, spilled through the speaker. Oh, thank God. Is this the owner? Please, we desperately need help. Our car just broke down on Highway 65. We've been trying every shop around, but no one's answering. It's so cold out here, and we have 2 little kids with us. Her voice hitched, threatening to dissolve into sobs. Jerry stiffened, his blood running cold despite the freezing air. He glanced at his watch. 4:47 p.m. He was supposed to be on the road to Jasmine's, carving a path through the pre-holiday traffic. The tantalizing aroma of cornbread, collard greens, and his sister's legendary bourbon-glazed turkey had been dancing in his mind since morning, a beacon of warmth and normalcy in his bleak reality. He pictured Maya and little Ethan, their faces alight with anticipation, their small hands clutching the napkin ring, the promise of laughter echoing in his thoughts. But then, cutting through the woman's frantic pleas, he heard it, the faint, heart-wrenching sound of children crying in the background, small, terrified whimpers swallowed by the static of the phone line. That sound, the sound of innocent fear, resonated deep within him, bypassing logic, bypassing his own desperate need to escape, bypassing everything but the primal pull of human compassion. That sound was the tipping point. Where exactly are you? He asked, his voice suddenly firm, resolute, already pivoting back towards the shop, his Thanksgiving plans dissolving like snowflakes on warm skin. Mile marker 78, near the exit to Montgomery, the woman replied, her voice trembling, a fragile tremor of cold and fear intertwined. The car had just died. Out of nowhere. My husband, he's tried everything, but it won't start. Nothing. Jerry exhaled, the frosty air pluming around his face like a sigh of resignation. He knew, with a grim certainty, that there was no way he could leave them stranded out there, exposed to the mercy of the elements, not with children shivering in the gathering darkness. "Hang tight," he said, his voice calm, reassuring, a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. "I'll be there as soon as I can." He quickly stabbed at Jasmine's number on his phone, his thumb clumsy with adrenaline. "Listen, Jazz, I'm really sorry, but something's come up. There's a family, stuck on the highway, kids in the car, freezing. I gotta go help." A beat of silence, a pause pregnant with understanding. Then a sigh, soft and accepting. "I knew you'd say that, Jerry. Just be careful, okay? The roads are getting slick." A flicker of her usual playful tone returned, a small spark of warmth in the digital void. "And, if you finish early, there's still a plate waiting for you. Turkey might be a little dry by then, but, you know." "Thanks, Jazz," he said, a genuine smile finally breaking through the grim lines etched around his mouth. "I'll see you soon." He hung up, already grabbing his keys, his toolbox. The familiar weight a comforting anchor in the swirling chaos of his rapidly changing evening. As he backed his truck out of the parking space, the snow intensified, the delicate flurries morphing into a determined blizzard, each flake a tiny icy bullet, the road ahead blurring into a white-streaked canvas. His truck's headlights, twin beams cutting through the swirling darkness, were his only guides as he navigated the eerily deserted highway. He'd witnessed enough roadside tragedies, the wreckage of lives and metal twisted into grotesque shapes, to know the inherent danger of these conditions, especially for a family stranded and vulnerable. 20 minutes crawled by, each mile marked by the rhythmic swish of the wipers and the increasing ferocity of the snowfall. Then in the distance he spotted them. A black SUV, a sleek, modern machine incongruously marooned on the shoulder of the highway, its hazard lights blinking weakly against the deepening gloom, like desperate signals in a vast, indifferent wilderness. A figure stood outside, waving a flashlight, a solitary beacon in the swirling snow. Jerry pulled over, the crunch of his tires on the icy shoulder a sharp counterpoint to the howling wind. He stepped out, the cold hitting him like a physical blow, a brutal slap of icy air that stole his breath and numbed his exposed skin. Despite the thick layers of his jacket, the cold seeped in instantly, a relentless, invasive presence. He ignored it, focusing on the man approaching him, his face etched with worry and relief. "Are you Jerry?" the man asked, his voice strained, tight with anxiety. "Yeah, you must be Marcus," Jerry replied, extending a gloved hand, the handshake firm, a brief connection forged in the shared urgency of the moment. "What happened?" "I have no idea," Marcus said, running a frustrated hand over his close-cropped hair. 1 minute, everything was fine, cruising smooth as silk, then bam. The engine just cut out. Dead. Won't turn over. No lights, nothing. Jerry nodded, his experienced gaze already assessing the situation, his mechanic's instincts kicking in. He peered into the SUV. Inside, a woman, Lauren he assumed, was huddled in the passenger seat, wrapped in a thick, woolen blanket, her arms protectively encircling 2 small children, their faces pale and pinched with cold and fear. The kids, no older than 6 or 7, their eyes wide and luminous in the dim cabin light, looked up at Jerry with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He turned back to Marcus, his voice practical, grounded. "Pop the hood. Let's see what we're dealing with." The moment he laid eyes on the engine, a knot of grim certainty tightened in his stomach. This wasn't a simple fix. The electrical system was utterly, comprehensively dead, a catastrophic failure. The cold, penetrating and relentless, had likely hastened the demise of an already weakened battery, but this was deeper, more systemic. "Bad news," he said, closing the hood with a heavy thud, the sound swallowed by the wind. "This isn't a quick roadside patch-up. You're going to need a tow, and a warm place to wait while I work on it." Marcus glanced back at Lauren, her face etched with worry, then back at Jerry, his shoulders slumping with defeat. "How long could it be?" "Could be a few hours," Jerry admitted, hedging his estimate, knowing it could easily stretch longer, depending on the extent of the damage, on the gremlins lurking within the SUV's frozen circuits. "Maybe more, depending on what I find once we get it back to the shop." Lauren's face crumpled, her carefully constructed composure finally fracturing. We were on our way to Atlanta," she choked out, her voice breaking. "My mother, she had a heart attack. This morning. The doctors, they aren't sure if she's going to make it through the night." A sob escaped her lips, raw and desperate, and Marcus instinctively reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her trembling shoulder. A pang of visceral empathy shot through Jerry, a sharp, unwelcome echo of his own past pain. He'd been in their shoes, adrift in a sea of fear and helplessness. His own mother, gone too soon, too suddenly, a gaping wound that time had only partially scabbed over. He remembered the raw, gut-wrenching regret of unspoken words, of chances lost, of goodbyes unsaid. He wasn't about to let that happen to someone else, not if he could prevent it. "Look," he said, his voice resonating with newfound resolve, a quiet strength born of shared human experience. I'll do whatever I can to get you back on the road. As fast as humanly possible. I promise." He gestured towards his truck, the warm glow of the interior a stark contrast to the bleak landscape surrounding them. "But first, let's get you all out of this cold." Marcus and Lauren nodded, their gratitude unspoken but palpable, radiating from them like a fragile heat. Jerry turned, the biting wind whipping at his face, and began unspooling his heavy towing chains, the clinking metal a stark sound in the desolate landscape. The night was just unfurling its inky canvas, and a long, arduous road stretched ahead, both literally and figuratively. But Jerry had made his choice, a silent vow uttered in the face of human need. He just didn't yet comprehend the profound, life-altering ripples that this seemingly simple act of kindness would unleash. Jerry worked with a practiced efficiency born of years, spent wrestling with stubborn machinery in unforgiving conditions. The heavy chains, cold and unyielding in his gloved hands, snaked around the SUV's undercarriage, each link secured with meticulous care. The snow, now falling with a relentless fury, thickened around him, clinging to his jacket in icy patches, stinging his exposed skin like 1,000 tiny needles. His fingers, despite the thick wool gloves, were rapidly succumbing to the numbing cold, losing sensation, becoming clumsy and unresponsive. But he powered through, fueled by a sense of purpose that transcended the physical discomfort, driven by the image of Lauren's tear-streaked face, the silent pleas in the children's frightened eyes. He double-checked every latch, every connection, his movements precise, deliberate, ensuring the heavy SUV was stable and secure for the precarious tow. Finally, with a grunt of satisfaction, he stepped back, nodding to Marcus, his breath pluming white in the frigid air. "All right, it's hooked up. I'll tow you to my shop. About 10 minutes from here. It's warm inside. Your family can wait there, get warm, while I figure out what went wrong." Marcus exhaled a visible breath of relief, the tension visibly draining from his posture. He glanced at Lauren, a silent communication passing between them, a shared burden momentarily lifted. Lauren offered a small, weary nod from inside the SUV, her eyes mirroring her husband's gratitude. "Man, I can't thank you enough," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, clapping a cold hand, surprisingly strong, on Jerry's shoulder. He rushed back to the SUV, opening the door, gently guiding Lauren and the children out into the swirling snow, ushering them towards the promised warmth of the shop. Jerry climbed back into the cab of his truck, the relative warmth a small, momentary luxury. He cranked the heater to full blast, the vents wheezing out lukewarm air, and put the truck into gear, feeling the slight tug, the subtle resistance as the weight of the stranded SUV shifted behind him. As he drove, slowly, cautiously, he kept a vigilant eye on his mirrors, ensuring the towed vehicle remained stable, that Marcus and his family were safe in the relative shelter of their own car. The road was treacherous, a slick, unpredictable expanse of ice and compacted snow. The blizzard intensified, the snow falling in thick, blinding sheets, reducing visibility to a mere handful of feet. The windshield wipers, working overtime, became frantic metronomes against the relentless assault of freezing precipitation, struggling to clear a path through the icy deluge. Jerry tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his focus absolute. The last thing they needed, the absolute worst possible outcome, was another accident, another layer of tragedy piled upon their already precarious situation. When they finally limped into the dimly lit parking lot of Washington's Auto Haven, Jerry breathed a silent sigh of relief, a small victory in the face of overwhelming odds. He carefully backed the SUV into one of the garage bays, the cavernous space offering a welcome respite from the biting wind and relentless snow. He parked, killed the engine, and hopped out, shaking off the accumulated cold like a shaggy dog shedding water. As he unhooked the towing chains, Marcus helped Lauren and the kids out of the SUV, his arm protectively around his wife, guiding them towards the shop's small, Spartan waiting area. It wasn't much, just a collection of mismatched, well-worn chairs, their upholstery faded and cracked, a small, flickering television mounted precariously on the wall, perpetually tuned to a static-laced local news channel, and a coffee machine, ancient and sputtering, that had clearly seen better decades. But it was warm, and dry, and safe, at least for now. The moment they stepped inside, the relative warmth enveloping them like a comforting blanket, Lauren let out a shaky, shuddering breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like an eternity. She pulled the children closer, her voice soft, choked with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This means more than you could possibly know." Jerry gave a reassuring nod, his gaze softening with understanding. "I get it," he said simply, not elaborating, knowing that words were inadequate, clumsy tools against the sharp edges of their current reality. He knew there was nothing he could say that would truly ease the gnawing fear of potentially losing a parent, the agonizing limbo of uncertainty. Instead, he turned to Marcus, his voice professional, focused. I'll get started on the car. If you need anything at all, just holler." Marcus watched as Jerry grabbed his well-worn toolbox, the metal gleaming faintly in the dim garage light, and began to methodically unpack his tools, rolling up his sleeves despite the lingering chill that permeated the unheated garage. He hesitated for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before stepping aside, pulling out his own phone. He walked towards the far end of the cramped waiting area, his voice dropping to a hushed murmur as he spoke into the receiver. Jerry didn't pay it much mind, his focus already consumed by the task at hand. He assumed Marcus was calling family, relaying the unfolding saga of their stranded Thanksgiving Eve, updating them on the uncertain status of their journey to Atlanta. Instead, he plunged headfirst into the mechanical puzzle before him, popping the SUV's hood, his experienced eyes immediately confirming his initial grim assessment. The electrical system was indeed shot, fried, beyond a simple jump start or battery swap. Something catastrophic had short-circuited, leaving a tangled web of dead wires and burnt-out components. A faulty alternator? A deeper wiring issue buried deep within the vehicle's complex system? It wasn't just a dead battery. This was a mechanical emergency of significant proportions. He let out a long, weary breath, running a grease-stained hand over his beard, the rough stubble scratching against his palm. He began to mentally calculate the fastest, most efficient path to a solution, mapping out the diagnostic steps, the parts he might need, the hours of painstaking labor that lay ahead. He was determined, with a fierce, unwavering resolve, not to let this family remain stranded any longer than absolutely necessary, especially not with those two small, vulnerable children who looked as though they were barely holding themselves together. The little girl, the older of the two, with pigtails the color of spun gold, remained glued to her mother's side, her small hand clutched tightly in Lauren's. But the little boy, bless his restless spirit, had started to fidget, his pent-up energy beginning to bubble to the surface despite the fear and exhaustion clinging to him. Lauren, ever the resourceful mother, must have sensed his rising tide of restlessness, because she rummaged through her oversized handbag, a bottomless Mary Poppins bag of parental necessities, and pulled out a set of coloring books and a brand-new box of vibrant crayons, a small island of color and distraction in the monochrome landscape of their ordeal. She handed them to the children, a silent offering of comfort, a temporary reprieve from the anxieties of the evening. Jerry caught a glimpse of the coloring book's thick, high-quality pages, the kind you didn't just grab at the corner drugstore, the crayons pristine, untouched. Everything about this family, from their impeccably tailored clothes to the quiet confidence with which they carried themselves, subtly suggested a life of comfort, of affluence, of resources readily available. But he pushed the fleeting observation aside, dismissing it as irrelevant. It didn't matter who they were, where they came from, or what they possessed. They were people in need, stranded and vulnerable, and he was a mechanic with the skills to help. That was all that mattered in the stark simplicity of this moment. He grabbed his tools, the familiar weight grounding him, and got to work, the low hum of the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing in the sudden quiet of the garage, a counterpoint to the rhythmic clink and clatter of metal against metal. He methodically removed the damaged components, tracing wires, diagnosing the extent of the electrical carnage, and began carefully installing new parts, his movements precise, economical, each action guided by years of ingrained expertise. Time seemed to warp and stretch, losing all sense of linear progression. The repetitive rhythm of his labor became a meditative mantra, keeping him focused, anchoring him to the present moment, pushing back the encroaching anxieties of his own precarious financial situation. Occasionally, his gaze would flick upwards, almost unconsciously, to the waiting area. He'd catch glimpses of Marcus still glued to his phone, his face an inscrutable mask of shadow and light, his voice a low, indistinct murmur. Or Lauren, her shoulders slumped with weariness, softly murmuring to the children, her expression a tense tableau of worry and forced calm. He worked faster, his movements becoming even more efficient, fueled by a renewed sense of urgency. He knew, viscerally, what it felt like to sit in that purgatorial space of uncertainty, to be trapped in the agonizing grip of helplessness, facing a situation spiraling beyond your control. He remembered the night his own mother had been rushed to the hospital, years ago now, yet the memory still raw, still capable of eliciting a sharp, visceral ache. He remembered the sterile, cold waiting room, the endless hours stretching into an eternity, the silent, desperate prayers whispered into the uncaring void, prayers that had ultimately gone unanswered. He clenched his jaw, tightening a stubborn bolt with unnecessary force, a silent vow forming in the depths of his heart. Not this time. By the time he was finally wiping down the last smudge of grease, the garage air thick with the acrid scent of burnt wires and hot metal, his hands were aching, stiff and clumsy from hours of relentless work in the frigid environment. He wiped his forehead with the back of his forearm, smearing a streak of grease across his skin, a badge of honor in the dim light. He stepped back, rolling his shoulders to ease the knots of tension that had accumulated there, and surveyed his handiwork. The SUV was running again, the engine purring with a steady, reassuring hum beneath the hood, a mechanical heartbeat restored to life. A wave of profound relief washed over him, a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with profit margins or business success. He let out a long, slow breath and turned to find Marcus standing nearby, his gaze fixed on him, a complex tapestry of emotions flickering in his eyes. "All set," Jerry announced, reaching for a frayed rag to wipe his hands clean, the grease staining the worn fabric a permanent testament to his profession. "She should run just fine now. But I'd still recommend getting her checked out again when you get to Atlanta, just to be safe. Electrical gremlins, they can be tricky." Marcus stared at him for a long, unblinking moment, his expression unreadable, a silent conversation passing between them, unspoken but deeply felt. Then, slowly, deliberately, he nodded, a gesture of profound understanding, of something more than just gratitude. I don't even know what to say," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. You didn't have to do all this. Especially on a holiday." Jerry shrugged, the gesture dismissive, downplaying the magnitude of his sacrifice. "Didn't feel right leaving you out there. Not with your kids in the car." He hesitated, the memory of his mother's sudden passing rising unbidden to the surface, a ghost in the quiet garage. He added, his voice softer now, imbued with a quiet sincerity, "I know what it's like, to not get a chance to say goodbye. If I can help, make sure you don't go through that." "I will." Something in Marcus's expression shifted, the unreadable mask cracking, revealing a glimpse of raw vulnerability, a flicker of shared human fragility. Something deeper, more profound, resonated between them in the silent space of the garage. But he didn't press, didn't probe. Instead, he reached for his wallet, the leather worn and supple with use. How much do I owe you?" Jerry sighed, glancing towards the ancient, dust-covered cash register, a relic from a bygone era, where he usually tallied bills, calculated labor costs, wrestled with razor-thin margins. He knew, with a stark clarity, what the parts alone had cost him, over $800 easily. Labor, on a holiday eve, in these conditions, that would have been another few hundred at least. But as he looked at Lauren, who was now bundling up the children, her face still drawn with worry, etched with the lingering fear of the unknown, he made a decision, a spontaneous, almost reckless act of generosity that defied all rational business logic. Just cover the parts," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm, the words hanging in the air like a silent offering. "No charge for labor. Consider it a Thanksgiving gift." Marcus blinked, his eyes widening in disbelief, searching Jerry's face for any hint of irony, of a hidden agenda. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," Jerry nodded, shoving his hands deep into his pockets, a gesture of finality, of unspoken resolve. "Like I said, I just wanted to help." Lauren made a small, choked sound, a sob suppressed, a dam of emotion threatening to burst. Before Jerry could react, before he could even fully process the weight of his own impulsive generosity, she stepped forward, her movements hesitant, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, and hugged him. It was brief, almost fleeting, just a quick, grateful squeeze, a fleeting moment of human connection in the sterile space of the garage, before she pulled back, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. You have no idea what this means to us," she whispered, her voice trembling, thick with gratitude. Marcus, still slightly stunned, pulled out his wallet, peeling off enough crisp bills to cover the cost of the parts, then reached into his coat pocket, extracting a sleek, understated business card. "Take this," he said, pressing it firmly into Jerry's hand, the card cool and smooth against his calloused palm. If you ever need anything at all, call me." Jerry barely glanced at it, his focus still lingering on Lauren's tear-streaked face, the quiet dignity of their gratitude. He slipped the card into his pocket with a curt nod, the gesture perfunctory, almost dismissive. "Safe travels," he said, his voice gruff, turning away to mask the sudden surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. As Marcus and Lauren gathered their children, their movements slow, deliberate, imbued with a newfound sense of hope, and headed towards the resurrected SUV. The kids waved shyly, small, hesitant gestures of farewell, before climbing inside. And then, just like that, they were gone, disappearing into the swirling, snowy night, their taillights fading into the blizzard's white embrace. Jerry let out a long, shuddering breath, rubbing his hands together for warmth, the cold seeping back into his bones now that the adrenaline had begun to recede. He locked up the shop, the metallic clang of the roll-up door echoing in the deserted lot. He was exhausted, bone-tired, his body aching from hours of labor in the frigid garage, his stomach growling with hunger, Thanksgiving dinner a distant, almost forgotten dream. But beneath the physical weariness, beneath the gnawing anxiety of his financial woes, a different feeling began to bloom, a quiet warmth spreading through his chest, a deep, resonant satisfaction that had nothing to do with profit or loss. He had done the right thing. In the face of human need, he had chosen compassion over calculation, kindness over self-interest. And in the quiet solitude of the snowy night, locking up his struggling shop, Jerry Washington had no inkling, no premonition of the extraordinary, transformative power contained within the simple business card now nestled, almost forgotten, in his jacket pocket, a silent promise waiting to be unveiled. Have you ever experienced the unexpected ripple effect of a simple act of kindness? Share your story in the comments below, and let's inspire a wave of compassion together. If you found Jerry's story moving, please like and share to spread the message that even in the darkest of times, human connection and generosity can illuminate the way. Subscribe for more inspiring stories that celebrate the extraordinary power of ordinary people. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to start your day with a dose of hope and heartfelt empathy. Jerry's story resonates deeply because it reminds us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the richness of our compassion and the integrity of our actions. In a world often driven by self-interest, Jerry's selfless act shines as a beacon of hope, demonstrating that even amidst our own struggles, we have the power to make a profound difference in the lives of others. It's a powerful testament to the enduring human capacity for kindness and the unexpected blessings that can arise when we choose to put others before ourselves. It challenges us to ask ourselves, what small act of kindness can we offer today, and what unforeseen positive ripples might it create?